Okay. So, should we start for the section number 6? So, this is a home run for Hungary. And so let's start with Zsolt Hunyadi from the University of Szeged. He studied at the CEU in Budapest and also in Szeged, and is a professor here. So he also was we talked about in Bavaria, in the real Bavaria of Bavaria, so in the south, and not in the north. But anyway, he is an expert for the history of military orders in Hungary, and he talks about the Hospitaller Priory. And so we are very proud to hear you, and it's your talk.
Thank you very much indeed, especially for this very kind introduction. And also I'm very thankful for the invitation of the organizers, because I felt myself a little bit sort of outsider of the overall topic. The emphasis will be definitely on the expression transformation, and at least I, let's say, sort myself to the religious section of the overall topic of this conference. So the reason I'm very thankful, because I struggle with this problem for ages by now, and I made a mistake in 2022. One of my publications, at the very end of a publication, came out in a Hungarian journal called ETAS. I made a promise, or took the burden of dealing with a problem which was by that time a little bit intriguing. This problem was actually raised by a colleague of mine with whom I actually even co-authored a volume published in English recently. There was a previous Hungarian version of it in 2019. And we did not really co-edit this work. We co-authored this work, and for this reason we let each other working or explaining our own ideas, not really criticizing each other's directions, which led later on to a little confusion or sort of contradiction. Now that's how I'm going to explain it right now. The original idea of my colleague András Réby, first published in 2017, and he republished this idea in several later works of his without any major modification. There was a bit of polishing at the very end, but let me return to it at the end. The major point of his argument was that the Hungarian Priory of the Hospital Order, by the late Middle Ages, most likely sharpening to the mid-15th century, separated from the overall structure of the order, and there are several manifest signs of this sort of separation, or as I labeled it in my title, sort of breaking. The major points are listed on this slide. First, that the Hungarian Priory was reluctant to pay the revenues to the central treasury of the order, which was an extremely important contribution, not simply to the functioning of the order as an institution, but also as a sort of everyday approach, the fight against the Turks. Even more precisely, first against the Mamluks, and later on the Ottomans. At the later point, I made a sort of Q&A list. I tried to deal with all these ideas. The second, that the prior or the priory did not attend the general chapters of the order, not even via representatives or procurators. which was a normal way in case of absence of certain priories. Also an important sort of observation of his, that the Hungarian priory simply disappeared from the table of contents of the Libellibularum, the cartularies in which all the outcoming letters were copied in the administration of the order. The other one is the sort of double appointment of the priors, namely not only the central organization of the order, namely the convent, who upon or at general chapters appointed the new priors, sometimes even preceptors, but parallel to this, according to András, even against it, the Hungarian branch locally appointed their own priors, and for many decades there was a sort of double leadership of the order. Another also important observation is the disciplinary problems. Namely, according to him, the growing number or the growing frequency of visitations to the Hungarian priory was mostly based on the disciplinary problems, and accordingly, the convent from Rhodes tried to, let's say, get back the Hungarian presence to the overall structure of the order. And last but not least, and this is that's why I listed as the last point, because he a little bit scrutinized his idea in this respect, namely the terminology. Accordingly, instead of the proper expression fratres hospitales, the Hungarian administration, both the preceptories themselves, also the other ecclesiastical institutions, even the royal chancery, used the word or the term cruciferi, or the ordo cruciferorum, and according to András, it also indicates that there's a sort of distancing from the center of the order. A little bit from the beginning, because most of you have some sort of I don't know, infection from the military orders, be it Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights, or the Templars. Just a little bit about the structural framework of the Hospitallers. The 21 priories of the order were, I'm talking about the late medieval situation and not going through the historical changes. So in the late Middle Ages, mid-15th century, the 21 priories of the order was arranged into 7 so-called lang or tongs, in Latin is linguae. And there's an addition or a sort of restructuring in 1462, and later it will be important, namely the separation of the Lang of Castile, Leon, and Portugal. Just referring back to the idea that the Hungarian priory disappeared from the list of those who are present or those whose business is going to be discussed at general chapters. Many years ago, I made sort of pro domo list for myself, because at that time I only researched the history of the order until the Council of Constance. Still staying a bit longer in Malta, National Library of Malta, I of course utilized my time to get a bit further. And I still have this list, and I just checked it, and it's quite clear that until 1510, the Hungarian priory was actually on the list. Sometimes the folios remain blank, but at least the order notified, even a sort of tentative approach, that this priory still exists and still belong to the order. Also, a little bit about the basic functioning, just in order to make the situation a bit clearer. The functioning or the very duty of the priories, practically the prior, is collecting and sending the revenues to Rhodes. And in many cases, especially in the 15th century, they did not personally vote the money or send the money, but either used procurators or already from the 14th century onwards, they used the Italian bankers or even merchants to collect the monies and to send either to Rhodes or from the 14th century onwards to Avignon, because for a while the Grand Master and the convent stationed in Avignon. Also important duty was to attend the chapter generals, especially for settling debates or disciplinary problems, and for the stipulation of the further or the future responsions, because it was not a set amount of money for decades or longer. It was normally recalculated according to the financial status of a given priory or even preceptories. And what is in fact a change or a manifest change or transition, let me return it a bit later, from the 15th century is the growing frequency of visitations. Namely, the convent sent a small group of people, usually experienced hospitallers, to visit these administrative units, to settle on the very spot disciplinary matters, and to collect the missing revenues, even years back, what the given priory actually failed. And if we put it into an international context and starting comparing the other priories of the order, it's quite clear that many other priories were in the same situation. They failed to pay the revenues. They had their own, at times they had their own locally appointed leaders, which the order or the leadership of the order for a while or for a longer while accepted, but from the mid-15th century this sort of relaxing attitude evaporated, and quite quickly. I'm still beginning to put together what were the premises for these changes, but it's definitely quite manifest and striking as the radical and very rapid change in the mid-15th century. Namely, the repeated Mamluk attacks against Rhodes, 1440 and 1444, and also, which was really a sort of, on the long run, very hostile and dangerous for the Aegean properties of the Hospitallers, the fall of Constantinople in 1453. And most likely the very rapidly increasing financial demand made or forwarded a pressure on the European price of the order. Another maybe a consequence of this situation is the more and more visible struggle within the leadership of the order, namely the sort of attempt to restructure the overall administrative structure of the, let's say, the voting system within the convent. Now I try to provide hopefully a reliable answer, or at least a potential solution for the questions. Yes, they failed to pay the revenues, but I don't think it was in any respect a unique feature. Many other priories had the same problem. Especially there was a sort of turning point of the Great Western Schism. In the first half of the first part of the schism, from the late 1370s onwards, only 9 out of the 21 priories paid the revenues on a regular basis. All the others, more than half of the priories, actually failed to pay. And it was not, let's say, the first happening story. Second, yes, indeed, the representatives of the Hungarian priory did not turn up in Rhodes. Actually, when they attended the general chapters, it was actually in Rome, twice in 1446 and 1466, most likely because it was much closer to the Kingdom of Hungary. As I showed you just before, the Hungarian priory did not disappear from the list of, or the table of contents of the Libri Popularum. And one of the most problematic, of course, is the double nominations of the to the head of the Priory. I already raised this problem in my book, which is based on my doctoral studies, published in 2010, that from the reign of King Sigismund of Luxembourg, the situation completely changed. Namely, the king intervened into the internal affairs of the Hungarian Priory, which was rather unknown at that time, but definitely not in the mid-15th century. By the mid-15th century, in many other parts of the European priories of the order, the rulers or even the local elite tried to intervene into the internal affairs, strictly ecclesiastical affairs of the order. Very recent studies by Gregory O'Malley, by Karl Borchardt, and I'm so happy that it is the very moment to make a sort of commercial for the Ordinis Militaris volume, because in the last volume, a young scholar, I think he is still a doctoral student in Stockholm, Wilhelm Ljunggard, published an important case study, even it's a bit more than a case study, concerning Eskilstuna, and the situation is absolutely the parallel what happens in Hungary. And the reason I had to deal with this problem is especially because I think he's a little bit misunderstood the Hungarian situation, what he actually used for parallel. But let me turn at the very end. The disciplinary problems. Yes, indeed, during the visitations, it was a core idea of the visitators, but it was nothing particularly concerning the Hungarian Priory. There were visitations arranged to any or almost all the other priories of the order, sometimes exactly with the same problems, not failing the payment of the revenues, disciplinary problem, and so on and so forth. I don't think there is any change to be observed in the mid-15th century. And last but not least, the terminology. I don't think it can be proved that this is a sign or a consequence of distancing or separation. From the late Arpadian period, the Hungarian, and as we proved with Professor Laszowski more than 20 years ago, even in the region, in Central Europe, instead of the fratres hospitales or the fratres Templi, the Central European charters very often use the term cruciferi a little bit erroneously, because they were definitely not crusaders. They're not to be confused with crusaders. From canon legal point of view, it's even impossible, but it's a fact. And it's not a 15th century phenomenon. It's much earlier, and it concerns several other parts of the continent. And the sort of conclusion or sort of preliminary conclusions. If I raise the question breaking or distancing, I think none of them. I think it's a very rapid or getting more and more rapid transition. And put into quotation marks rapid because to what extent or compared to what, but definitely in comparison to the 14th century changes or transition, it was definitely rapid. It was both structural and financial transition, but nothing particularly concerning the Hungarian Priory. It was rather an overall European phenomenon as far the hospital is concerned. And this, even behind it, or this is what I don't know yet in this very moment, sort of consequence, there was a very manifest tension within the convent, and the management or the reaction upon this tension, what Wilhelm Ljunggard also observed, may lead to such situations. And what I would like to emphasize is definitely these, let's say, color locale to be chased or analyzed, because as Professor Burkhardt showed many years ago, it is not by all means a sort of national rivalry. However, it is quite clear that the locals get more and more involved into the business of the order. The local elite demand a sort of leading role to be played in the Priory, and of course it automatically led to a sort of tension. And of course, especially the very recent studies revealed that comparison is extremely important in this respect. So instead of, how to say, raising single case studies, it's much better and much useful to put into the international context, because we definitely can get much more out of this or such situations, because, and this is the last observation, nothing new under the sun, namely that the devil is in the details. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this very detailed discussion about the situation of the hospitals in Hungary. And so I think we have a lot of possibility to discuss that afterwards. The next presentation is from Antal Molnár. He is, I hope I'm correct, the director of the Hungarian Academy of Science, is a research center of humanities. It's a long title. We are honored that you are here, and he studied also in Szeged, but also he has a PhD from Paris 4 Sorbonne. So this is another thing, and the third thing, we discussed it privately, this relation to Rome and to the Pope, and although that this was not a big distance between the Campo Santo Teutonico and the former Hungarian Church of St. Stephen nearby. Now it's gone, unfortunately, but the relationship between Hungary and the German lands is still here, and so we are very proud that you give us a presentation about the Friars at the crossroads, the Franciscans in the turn of the 15th to the 16th century. So it's in the Balkans, I think. It's so, and I look from the very, very far west to this presentation. Thank you.
Dear Professor, thank you very much for this kind presentation. Dear President, dear colleagues, Western Christianity and potentially the entirety of Western European culture underwent a major transformation at the onset of the 16th century. This transformation involved the splitting of Latin Christianity, which had been in existence for a millennium and a half, and was exacerbated by the Ottoman threat and conquest. These changes presented significant challenges to the existing institutions, the majority of which were unable to effectively address them. Our international conference will examine these challenges and responses from a multifaceted approach. The present paper, which is also linked to this issue, aims to take a closer look at an institution that has been perhaps the most dynamic respondent to this transition in the Catholic Church, the observant Franciscan order. The order played a prominent role both in the development of the new Protestant institutional system and in the preservation and consolidation of the old Catholic one. This presentation summarizes the findings of 15 years of research, which culminated in the publication of an 800-page source book at the Institute of Franciscan History in Rome in 2022. The book gathers together the formularies compiled by the observant Franciscan Vicariate or after 1517 province of Hungary. They consist of 2 full formularies and 2 smaller collections of model letters, a total of 878 documents. 3 of the manuscripts in which the sources are preserved are held in the National Széchenyi Library Manuscript Department and 1 in the Franciscan Library in Gyöngyös. This is the page of the first formulary, this is 1 page of the second formulary, and this is the volume of the third formulary and the page of the third formulary. The earliest dated letters were written in 1451 and the latest in 1554. The greater part of the letters that bear dates or otherwise datable are from the first decade and a half of the 16th century, mainly between 1506 and 1515, and the period between 1530 and 1535. The documents provide a unique reconstruction of the Franciscan strategy in the face of the challenges of the time. These challenges led to the collapse of the medieval kingdom of Hungary and, by extension, the Catholic Church as a result of the Ottoman invasion, the Civil War, and the Protestant Reformation. Reforms of religious orders always involved centralization, leading to more systematized and formalized written communication. Of all church organizations, the observant Franciscans had the most centralized system and the most widely spread institutional network. Their written communication was also, understandably, the most complex. The vast majority of observant Franciscan manuscripts, compiled at the turn of the 15th and 16th centuries, fall into 3 major categories: liturgical books, pastoral documents, mainly sermons, and documents concerning governance of the order, copies of rule, chapter constitutions, chronics of the order, and papal and royal charters of privilege. Directly complementing these were items of correspondence and letters of permission of superiors and members of the orders, visitation, and chapter acts, and documents relating to appointments, all of which have been preserved only in formularies. It is clear from international comparison that the body of Franciscan correspondence from Hungary is the largest yet published. A total of 550 model letters from the 25 known European formularies have already been published. The 878 letters in my book are 50% more numerous than the whole European corpus hitherto accessible in print. The internal principle by which the formularies were compiled necessitated the copying of documents types and subject matters that were characteristic of the life of the community and formed a major part of it. They thus provide a more graphic account of life in the institution than any other surviving source. Some original documents were copied into the formularies without deleting all of the specific information. This tells us much about the history of certain convents and members of the orders, concerning events, building projects, donations, and personal relationships and careers. From its inception, the history of the Franciscan order in Hungary, despite its spectacular expansion and often noisy successes, has been characterized by a continuous struggle to establish and preserve its distinct identity. This struggle has been particularly pronounced from the 3rd decade of the 16th century onwards, when the order faced a crisis of survival. The Franciscan observance in Hungary is intricately intertwined with 2 significant historical entities. On the one hand, it emerged from the Bosnian Franciscanism, and on the other hand, it gained strength in course of the mission of Giovanni da Capestrano and San Giacomo della Marca, the most influential reformers of the Italian observance. The Vicaria Bosni emerged as the most dynamically developing institution of the Catholic Church in the medieval Balkans, establishing numerous friaries across the Kingdom of Hungary, in Venetian Dalmatia, in the Republic of Ragusa, Dubrovnik, and in southern Italy. Its missionary efforts also extended to Wallachia and Bulgaria. The convents in southern Hungary became independent in 1448 under the name Vicaria Hungariae and formed an independent Hungarian province in 1517. From 1523, the Franciscan province in Hungary was named after the Holy Savior, Provincia Hungariae Sanctissimi Salvatoris in Hungaria Ordinis Minorum, in briefly Salvatorian province. It is important to note, however, that the old Hungarian Franciscan province did not cease to exist either. From 1523, it operated as the Franciscan province in Hungary, named after the Virgin Mary, Provincia Sanctae Mariae in Hungaria, Ordinis Fratrum Minorum, briefly Marian province. The Hungarian observants, similarly to the Bosnians, avoided both the Italian and the Spanish hermit and mystic movements, whilst also rejecting the radical model of poverty. That was characteristic of the French observance. Consequently, the Hungarian variant of the observance represented a moderate, conservative, and institution-centered renewal in which fidelity to the rule and strict observance of the externals were deemed paramount. These characteristics can most accurately be described by the term pragmatic Franciscanism. The daily life of the Franciscans were not focused on the heroic role of sacrifice. Rather, they revolved around regular prayer life and pastoral work. In 1523, the Salvatorian province comprised 70 convents, housing approximately 1,500 friars. The Marian province, the other province of Franciscan in Hungary, is known to have possessed 37 convents in 1533, which, when calculated proportionally, equated to around 700 friars. However, within 2 generations, there was a radical reduction from the original 100 convents, friaries, and 2,200 friars to 8 convents and approximately 60 friars by the end of the century, representing an average loss of 19.5%. The convents in southern Hungary were destroyed by military operation between 1526 and 1537, while those in the Great Hungarian Plain and Transdanubia were eradicated by campaigns between 1541 and 1556. In the regions that came under Habsburg rule, the landlords who predominantly adopted the Lutheran or Helvetic form of Protestantism withdrew their support from the friars. Consequently, the towns and the villages which had become alienated from monasticism also ceased to provide alms. The model documents published in the volume show that Franciscan written records developed into homogeneous corpora within individual provinces, following universal principles of typology and form. One piece of evidence for this is the collection of exhortations in the first formulary. This is a page of these exhortations. It is unique in Europe and gives textual proof of the interconnection between official records of religious orders and homiletic spiritual literature. It also gives an insight into the pragmatic, institution-centered spirituality of the observant Franciscans in Hungary. In addition, letters and other texts, primarily surviving books from their libraries, show that Franciscans' attitude to humanist culture was much more reasoned and integrative than has been concluded from previous research. From the register of names, the so-called tabulae ordinis of the province of 1533, I have identified regional notes of the Hungarian province consisting of 58 houses and about 890 members in the third decade of the 16th century. Members of the orders came in the greatest numbers from the lands of the Saxon territories of Transylvania, South Transdanubia, the Trans-Tisa region and Slavonia, and so the friars were mainly Hungarians, Slavonians, Croatians, and Transylvanian Saxons. Consequently, there is a need to review theories concerning relations between the observant Franciscan and the Protestant Reformation. The hypothesis that the Franciscans were predominantly successful in the Great Plain and the Seklerland, and to a lesser extent in other regions, appears to be inaccurate. Previous researches posited that the Reformation exerted a more significant influence among Hungarians residing in the uplands of the Great Plain due to the substantial presence of the Franciscans in that regions. However, it is more probable that this effect was experienced to a greater extent in South Transdanubia and among the Transylvanian Saxons. The formularies are most informative about the governance of the order and give a complete account of its institutional structure, supervision, and administration. The bulk of the documents concern the organization of visitation and provincial chapters, Hungarian participation in chapters general, and travel for administrative and other purposes. These cover every aspect of the practical legal affairs in the province. Evidence suggests that the government of the observant Franciscans was highly developed and well organized. This enabled the order to confront challenges such as the Ottoman conquest and Protestantism with great effectiveness. The Franciscans were able to mobilize members of the order rapidly, either sending them to engage in combat or arranging for their escape. The other very important subject of analysis is the financial management of the observant Franciscans. This employed an innovative system resting on two pillars, very similar to the operation of modern non-profit organizations: fundraising and logistics. To raise funds, the Franciscans established and nurtured connections in various sections of society to ensure continuous support. Being dependent on donations, the observant Franciscans were necessarily much more intensively embedded in the society than the monastic orders whose economy was based on property. The order's most important and closest connections were with its most powerful sponsors, above all the sovereigns, the aristocracy, and the church hierarchy. In return for the support they received, the friars received their sponsors into their spiritual confraternity. Aid came from every section of society, and not just from prelates and aristocrats, as proven by many modern documents concerning the admission of the lower nobility, widows, burghers, canons, parish priests, and religious. Logistics consisted of transport, storage, and allocations to friaries to ensure that they received equal shares. The custodies of the province constituted economic units within which donations had to be allocated and delivered. Ottoman and German destruction, bad harvest, general impoverishment, and the departure of the nobility from the order created serious scarcity and supply inequalities in the province, and the regular system of barter developed among friaries and custodies. From the combined analysis of formulary collections and the order's registers of names, we can also localize several friary workshops and outline the complex structure of crafts and trades in the province. It is clear from our sources that building projects were supervised by Franciscan friars. Carpentry was the preserve of laborers, and external craftsmen were brought in for stone carving and masonry. The formularies clarify and deepen Jenő Szűcs graphic account of the part of the Franciscan played in the 1514 Peasants' Revolt. They provide further information of the observants' role in military ventures against the Ottomans, and previously unknown documents contribute to the revelation of the true reason why Peasants' Revolt broke out with such elemental force. The tyrannical action of the nobility was frustrating the divine plan and thus denying the Crusaders their salvation. Major lessons have also been drawn from a study of the observant Franciscan strategy to deal with Ottoman conquest. The superiors concentrated members of the order from threatened friaries together with their movable property in well-defended friaries. They followed the same procedure when a patron withdrew his support, returning the building and the donations to the patron and settling the members of the order in large friaries. This concentration ensured their survival in the major centers. Places that were threatened or had already been destroyed were systematically closed down, or where there was a demand and an opportunity, resettled elsewhere. The formularies tell us little about the direct effects of the Protestant Reformation. The letters contain only complaints and reprisals against scandals in general, a breach of the vow of poverty, straying, fervent reactions of social and cultural criticism. Publication of the Hungarian observant Franciscan formularies compiled in the early 16th century considerably expands the documentary basis for study of a period seriously lacking sources, the first half of the 16th century. From the years between 1448 and 1526, we know of only 59 documents issued by the Hungarian observant Franciscans to document original documents, most of them confraternity letters or petitions to the benefactors. It is therefore no exaggeration to say that the documents published in the source book bring a previously utterly unknown Hungarian documentary culture out of obscurity. In addition, by virtue of the universal character of the Franciscan order, the formularies will be of great use to the international historians, particularly for comparative studies. They are the internal documentation of the institutions which perhaps had the greatest significance in the Hungarian cultural history of the opening decades of the 16th century, giving a first-hand account of their everyday life and the great efforts they made to secure their survival. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this wonderful overview of our province, the province in Hungary and all these priories and how it worked. And so this is very interesting. So, and now we have a third presentation from Attila Bárány, I may say, of a good friend of mine here from the University of Debrecen, from the Institute of History, and he is he started in Budapest, but then come to the real place in Hungary, to Debrecen, to the university here, and he is here as a professor. So he is an expert for medieval Hungarian diplomacy, for the history of military history of the Middle Ages, and also sometimes he makes connections between Hungary and England. And so, but now he talks to us from Corvinus to Mohács, the Western diplomacy of Jagiellonian Hungary. So it's your floor, Attila, please come.
much. Thank you very much, dear Professor, dear President. To keep up with the traditions of our university, I should perhaps address you as Spectabile Professor Honoris Causa Universitatis. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, in assessing the age of the Jagiellonians in Hungary, many scholars have set out from the syndrome of Mohács and the myth of decay. Literature maintained that the flourishing kingdom of the Arpads and the Angevin deteriorated under the Jagiellonians. Hungary, heading toward the tragedy of 1526, became politically isolated and lost its influence. The symptoms of internal political crisis and financial difficulties all severely affected the country's capacity and left a mark on the stability of its foreign policy and the quality of its diplomacy. Despite this paper is making an attempt to prove that the Jagiellonians also had an independent foreign policy, a distinctive one in certain case studies here. I would not cover all the period, the whole period, from the death of Matthias Corvinus to the Battle of Mohács, but in the early 1520s, for example, where my case studies are from the years of 2021 to 23, they were not relegated to the background to such an extent that they would have been reduced to insignificance. The major issue here to treat is whether there existed any kind of a dynastic understanding in the field of foreign relations, mainly between Poland and Hungary, seen in case studies in these 3 years. I wonder, could they have acted as parts of a dynastic bloc, or might there have been any chance of a possible cooperation, mainly regarding to the relationship to the West, after the fall of Belgrade, 1521? Did the two countries, King Sigismund of Poland and King Louis II of Hungary, ever try to take a unified stand? Or rather, did they remain members of a conglomerate of crowns? There might have been chances of possible cooperation, and I will be overseeing this issue in different spheres where dynastic concord was to be or might have been present. The basis for coordinations did by all means existed. There was a regular communication, royal correspondence, and frequent touches between high dignitaries, secular and ecclesiastical, in Poland and Hungary. The spread of news was quick and usual between the two courts as well. That is, the advance of the Ottomans, talks with Western envoys. There were coordinated negotiations, joint and allied treaties, joint conferences, you can see on the slide, common platforms in foreign affairs, concerted procurationes for envoys. So we have evidence for mutual representations of Poland and Hungary by ambassadors in Rome and in Venice. For example, regular attention to its dynastic relations, for example, the Habsburg Jagiellonian marriage schemes were present on the table. The communications with Western courts was coordinated and the incoming news were shared. Concerted action was in a way possible after the loss of Belgrade. I will be calling forth or bringing forth examples after the loss of Belgrade, seeing them or bringing forth them from the field of Western policy towards France and towards England and the Empire. In a way, continuing my colleague's theme from yesterday, Attila was speaking on French relations after the death of Charles de Gaulle yesterday, and I'll be seeing case studies between the relations of King of France, Francis I, and the Jagiellonians of Poland and Hungary. The ever-present question is whether there was a common cause of the two countries in these years after the tragic shock of the fall of Belgrade. And we have a range of sources I'm going to show you of embassies sent to the West. For example, the first, even before the loss of Belgrade, Girolamo Balbi or Hieronymus Balbus was sent to England, to Charles V, the Emperor, and in France as well, as there are sources to underlie this, that he was not only commissioned by King Louis II, but he was also commissioned by Sigismund of Poland on his own name. You can even see in the sources, conjunctio nostra orator nepotis nostri pariter nostro nomine. So, Sigismund and Louis were doing this embassy in concord and coordination against the common danger and common threat of the Turks, as the envoy himself, writing to the imperial chancellor, as calamitas hits Poland as well, non minus etiam res Polonicas. Hungary and Poland are under the same threat. So the mandate is Rege Poloniae as well. Sigismund is also asking help from the West, as the envoy's letter proves. And in the correspondence of the imperial chancellor to the emperor Charles V, in the French source, we can see that there were letters sent to the emperor by the king of Poland and at the same time the king of Hungary. So that means there was a kind of a coordination of foreign efforts at the same time. And going over to this mission, Girolamo Balbi was sent first to the Calais conference and to England, then the Netherlands, court of Charles V at that time. And he was also commissioned to apply to the King of France at that time. And just to take another letter from his correspondence, in December 1521, he met a new envoy, at the same time sent tabellarius cum litteris, so letters, new letters from the King of Hungary, from the King of Poland at the same time towards the King of England, Henry VIII, and all the representatives of the power constellation, France and the Empire. And we have also sources, other sources to prove this. Sigismund is writing to Francis the First a few months later, and he's using the term the defense of our both kingdoms, defensione regnorum che nostrorum, and the two kingdoms, the duo sola regna nostrum in Hungary. So he's thinking in the terms of our both kingdoms, of our common cause. And if we have a look at the French side, we have a letter of Antoine de Pret from the journal Jean de Barillon, secrétaire de Chancelier Dupré, on the French king's behavior, and he's probably just because of this mission of a common Polish and Hungarian envoy is inclined to this amitié, inclined to this alliance, and is also willing to give aid to the powers, both of the Jagiellonians. And there are Hungarian initiatives to negotiate with France. We have an envoy at that time in Rome, but Stefanos Brodericus, or Stepan Brodaric, or István Brodaric, he was based in Rome, but he is commissioned to treat with France in the following year. And he's also, we know from his correspondence that he's also commissioned by the King of Poland. He's a dual agent, or I would say an envoy, in Rome, and in the French schemes he's also coordinated from the Krakow court. And as he is also making an oratio to the Pope, Adrian VI, and from this it also appears that he's a joint envoy, as at the same time a Polish envoy, Jan Dantiszek, or Johannes Dantiscus, is sent to England for the same cause, and he is sent by the King of Poland and his Nepos, the Rex Hungariae, and he's dealing with the King of England at the same time. So at that time, the King of Poland, the King of Hungary, believed that even France could be gained for the effort of the crusade against the Turks. And we have another correspondence from and a relation from the French envoy Antonio Rincon, whom I will not be dealing here because our young colleague who made the presentation yesterday, Csenge Timar, is a specialist on the embassy of Antonio Rincon. But some of the information of his report is important for us because he sent to both of the courts, Hungary and Poland as well, partly to seal an alliance with a dynastic tie. I will not go into details, but it is a double marriage scheme between France and Poland, which is supported by the Hungarian court, and the leader of, or partly a very influential leader of Hungarian foreign policy at that time, Archbishop Esztergom György Szatmári, is also supporting this and is sending towards Poland this envoy. And when the French envoy is in Krakow, he's putting forward the opinion of the Hungarian political leaders and King Louis at the same time. So they are coordinating their efforts, and Sigismund is also speaking of an unione contra il Turco, because of the loss of Belgrade and Rhodes. And if we go further, Louis is sending an envoy to Poland. There is a regular touch between the two courts in these years, and King Louis is supporting an amicitiat, alliance with the King of France, hoping that they or he may enter into an alliance with them, and France, they are hoping that the King of France will be inclined to give assistance. So they hoped that they will be able to have assistance from the King of France, and to have a piece of another correspondence of the Habsburg envoy's correspondence, Andrea del Burgo, based in Buda, who is an envoy of Archduke Ferdinand. And he's writing very heavily on these negotiations. He's speaking of a conventum trium maestatum, that a congress of the three Polish, Hungarian, and French monarchs underway. So if we go further, a bit further, Burgo is reporting to Ferdinand in these years, 1523, that Sigismund and Louis are coordinating their efforts and their negotiations through these envoys, and they are making all effort to seek for peace with the Turks, because the princes in the empire are not giving any other offer but to seek at least a peace with the Turks. So that would give the only chance, a remaining chance to close approach the King of France, and they are writing letters. Sigismund is writing letters to Louis. Poland cannot, in the spring 1523, Poland cannot help make efforts for talks with the Turks, and the only way for them at that time, it seems. It is also, Habsburgs are following the course of the events. It is turning out from Burgo's report, and Burgo's report to Ferdinand, and they are against, of course, these evil practices and seditious efforts of the diabolical French at that time in Hungary and in Poland. And the King of France is also writing to Sigismund and writing to Louis. We have two letters preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, which leads us also to the solutions that the King of France may help or renew the old alliance, and he refers to the old envoy sent to him by Poland, by Hungary, 2 years before, and he's aware of the name, Girolamo Balbi, and we are inclined, he says, we are inclined to help you. We are inclined, we are willing to open the negotiations and send envoy to Poland and Hungary again. To the same shorter letter is sent to the copies. It is the BNF has only a copy of this letter, copied into a codex of collections of correspondence, and. King Louis is writing to the Western powers, to Henry VIII. He's writing to Charles V, and they are preserved in Vienna as appendices of the Habsburg envoy in Buda at that time. But and the Polish king is hoping that France would send an envoy to Rome, and in the spring at that time, I think these Polish and Hungarian coordination or concert of foreign efforts would move France and move the emperor towards a peace scheme, because we see that a French envoy, the Cardinal of Auch, it is everywhere in these letters. Yes, Burgos report, Cardinal, and this is what Cardinal Dosch is having negotiations in Rome, and with high dignitaries, Luis Fernandez de Cordoba, Duke of Sessa, imperial envoy, and Hungarian envoy István Brodaric, and they are meeting. We have sources that they are meeting in Rome, in Santa Maria del Popolo, and it seems that it is moving forward to the common peace of the warring parties in 1523. However, of course, it is known by the Turks themselves. And at that time, in the summer of 1523, it is also again a Brodaric letter to Sigismund, and we have a report from Venice. It's, you know, we have probably heard yesterday that everything is known in Venice. If it's not known in Venice, it does not exist. So we have a report from Venice. So the Turk is making an assault towards Poland. And with the help of the Turk, probably the Tatars and the Turks, at that time made an assault against Poland. So Christendom in those parts are not existing. So there is a very heavy assault against Poland, and there is a very heavy assault in the autumn against Hungary. So at that time, Sigismund, King of Poland, would not treat with the King of France. But in these 3 years, to sum up its conclusion, in these 3 years, there was a common cause, sometimes of the conjunctio nostra, of both of our crowns, the two crowns of us, as even in terminology of the letters, it turns out that there were at least certain cases a chance for coordinated action. I would not say it is a mutual dynastic communication and common action, but they always say that it is our common cause and concern, and it is for the defense of our both kingdoms. So even sometimes in their minds, in their thinking, they are thinking of their common cause against the pagans. Thank you very much indeed. Bye.
Thank you very much for this documentation of this intense diplomacy between Poland, Hungary, France, England. And so we have 3 different presentations about the Franciscan observance, about the Hospitalis, and about diplomacy. So questions from your side. Jürgen.
Very impressive presentation here. I would completely agree with your arguments. I think on the question of separation of the Priory of Hungary, I don't think there was any separation. But I would like to ask for a special aspect. On the slides, you had these mentioning of the Priory of Hungary in the documents and the Libri Volarum from Rose. And the dimensions were both in the lingua Alemannia and in the lingua Italia. And of course, these institution of lingua allowance were only in the convent, of course, but there was, it seems, a change of ordering these things and put the priory to different lands during the course of time. And which I think things make more complicated that I think from the end of the 14th century there was some complex exchange of possessions, properties in southern France, southern Italy, and some agreement between the Lang of Italy and the Lang of Provence on change of officials. So sometimes provincial officials from the Provence would go to houses in southern Italy. And somehow in there was also the prior of Hungary, where sometimes the priors were nominated from the Lang of Italy or even from the Lang of Provence, as far as I'm right. So for example, on the Chapter General in Rome, 1446, there was a commission reorganizing the statutes, and as far as I know, some Jagiellonian or something, he was formerly the Hungarian prior, was named as a Hungarian prior in the sources. So can you say anything about these foreign priors of Hungary? I think mostly they were more nominally, not really in Hungary themselves. Can you say anything about these different priors from outside?
Thank you very much indeed. Extremely interesting, and I just didn't want to bore the rest of the audience with such otherwise important issues, but indeed in this respect the devil is in the details. Yes, the original negotiation was in 1373. We don't have the original source, but it was renegotiated in 1427. Unfortunately, they copied the original text, so we know this agreement between the Italian and Provençal sides, and it functioned perfectly. I mean, sort of alternative, once the Italian, once the Provençal, and then in 1427 it was in a way debated, but it was not a final, let's say, decision or any major change. But in 1446 they started the renegotiation without any overall decision, but it was already, let's say, brought back to the table. And the final decision was in 1466, and it is definitely the merit of András Ribi, who studied this manuscript, which is actually in Italian. And the debate started again that to which language, or which language the Hungarian priory should belong. And the argument was that because of most of the landed estates are to be found in the Dalmatian coast, which is actually under Venetian influence now, so it should belong to the Italian langue. Now the problem was it was absolutely nothing to do with the reality, because most of the landed estates were actually not in that part, but in the argument they used it. And my, how to say, idea, and in the written version I would like to explain it, is in the from 1446, a new internal struggle started in the convent, and not really because of the revenues, because if you send the revenues to roads, it's not really the question, the very question which langue is who is making the payment, because all the money goes for the defense of roads or the repairing the walls of the city of roads, but the election of the Grand Master and the votes and the proportion of the votes. And from the mid-15th century, in this respect, it was very important to whom belonged whom. And it was, I think, behind this, but it's still a sort of working hypothesis in this moment.
Next question, please. Yeah.
I have a question concerning the Franciscan friars, because there was a solution that pragmatic Franciscans and strategy of survival. And what about the secularization in Hungary and the estimates and revenues in the second half of the 16th century? It's outside your lecture, but possibly you can say something about it.
Thank you very much for this question. I think that the secularization or the reformation of these convents in the 16th century was predominantly a process by the so it was not a secularization as in Germany, who the convents and friaries became Protestants and were destroyed by the landlords and so on, as the German research presented this. In Hungary, this secularization or reform of the convents were characterized by the end of the support of the landlords and the cities. So we have very few information about the destruction of convents and about the reformation of the convents. And we have a lot legend or mythology about preacher, the first Protestant preachers who were friars previously. But we have these tabulae, this list of names, and I don't find any friar who is considered by the Hungarian research as a preacher and previously Franciscan. So it was a grand debate in the Hungarian research if these reformators or preachers were Franciscans or not. I think that these first reformators came from the surrounding of the friaries, but they weren't effectively friars.
Okay, next question, please. Silence. Everybody waits for the Hungarian hospitality. Okay, then thank you. So I think I finish on this point, and so thank you for all the three who give their presentations, and thank you, and also for the a short but very important discussion. And then I think I give back to Laszlo or to Adam, who is saying things, but I take the opportunity to say thank you to the organizers and the wonderful food and discussions and all that. So it's always nice to be in Debrecen. Thank you.